At 18, most people in the world are still learning who they are. In America, they're expected to leave home and prove they already know. And if they don't, society quietly labels them as behind, dependent, or unsuccessful. That pressure alone explains why millions of Americans move away from their families before they're emotionally, mentally, or even financially ready, and why they pretend it doesn't hurt. Imagine being told your whole life that love means distance, strength means separation, and success means leaving the people who raised you. That's not a movie plot. That's normal life in America from a very young age. American kids are taught one core idea: independence equals worth. Not kindness, not loyalty, not family bonds. Independence. The faster you become self-reliant, the more respected you are, and staying close to your family too long. That starts to feel like a personal failure, even if no one says it out loud. So when an American turns 18, something strange happens. The question is no longer are you happy or are you safe? It becomes when are you moving out? And if the answer isn't soon, the silence that follows says everything. This is where the struggle begins. Because most Americans don't move away from family because they want to. They move because they feel they have to. The problem isn't family conflict. The problem is cultural pressure. A pressure so strong that people would rather struggle alone in a tiny apartment than live comfortably with parents and be judged for it. In America, struggle is respected more than support. If you're exhausted but independent, people admire you. If you're supported but stable, people question you. Think about how confusing that is for a young adult. You're told to chase dreams, but only if you chase them alone. You're told to value family, but only emotionally, not physically, not practically. You can love your parents, just don't need them. Need is weakness, and weakness is something Americans are taught to hide at all costs. This creates a quiet loneliness that starts early and follows people for years. Now compare this to countries where family is central to life. In many parts of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, living with family as an adult isn't shameful. It's normal. It's efficient. It's emotional security. Parents don't rush their children out the door. They prepare them slowly. They support them while they build careers. They share responsibilities, and no one questions a person's worth because they live with family. In those cultures, moving out is about readiness. In America, it's about image. Ask yourself honestly, which system sounds more human? In the US, the idea of finding yourself is often used to justify separation. Young people are told they must leave home to grow, as if growth can only happen in isolation, as if proximity to family somehow blocks maturity. But what actually happens is that many Americans grow up fast on the outside and stay emotionally young on the inside. They learn how to pay rent before they learn how to regulate emotions. They learn how to hustle before they learn how to ask for help. And because everyone around them is doing the same thing, no one questions whether this lifestyle is healthy. It's just normal. Let's talk about a real example. A 19-year-old from a middle-class American family gets accepted into a college 3 states away, not because it's the best option financially, not because it's the safest, but because leaving feels like progress. The parents encourage it, even if it strains their budget. The student moves out, takes loans, works part-time, struggles mentally, eats badly, sleeps poorly, but feels proud. Why? Because struggling alone feels like adulthood in America. Now imagine that same situation in a different country. The student might attend a local university, live at home, save money, build skills, and slowly transition into independence. No shame, no pressure, no identity crisis. Which version creates stronger adults in the long run? In America, independence is rushed, emotional development is delayed, and family distance becomes permanent. Once Americans move out, returning home feels like going backward, even when life gets hard, even when mental health suffers, even when loneliness becomes overwhelming, because admitting you need your family again feels like admitting failure. And that fear is stronger than common sense. This is why so many Americans say they're lonely, even while being surrounded by people. They learn it early how to leave, but not how to stay. Here's something people don't talk about enough. Distance doesn't automatically create growth. Sometimes it just creates silence. Sometimes it creates pride. Sometimes it creates emotional walls that are hard to tear down later. And yet, Americans keep repeating the cycle. Parents raise children to be independent quickly because that's how they were raised. Children move warily and repeat the pattern with their own kids. And slowly, family becomes something you visit on holidays instead of something you built life around. Now ask yourself this and really think before answering. How different would it? American society look if staying close to family was seen as strength instead of weakness? Would mental health improve? Would loneliness decrease? Would young adults feel less pressure to figure everything out at 20? Would relationships be deeper? Would marriages last longer? Or is the fear of dependency so strong that Americans would rather struggle alone than heal together? This doesn't mean Americans don't love their families. They do, deeply, but love in America is often expressed through distance, not closeness. Through phone calls instead of shared meals. Through visits instead of daily presence. Through independence instead of interdependence. And the most heartbreaking part, many Americans don't realize what they've lost until much later. When parents age, when holidays feel empty, when success feels hollow, and when independence no longer fills the silence. So here's the real lesson hidden inside all of this. Independence is powerful, but forced independence is damaging. Growth doesn't require abandonment. Strength doesn't require distance. And adulthood doesn't begin the moment you move out. It begins the moment you understand when to stand alone and when to stay connected. Maybe the question isn't why do Americans move away from family so early? Maybe the real question is, what did they have to give up to believe that was the only way to succeed? And now I want to hear from you. Do you think moving out early truly makes people stronger or just lonelier? Is independence overrated or is family closeness undervalued? And if you had the choice, would you rather struggle alone or grow together? Because the answers say more about society than any statistic ever could. There's something else happening beneath the surface that most people never question. In America, personal space isn't just preferred, it's protected. Privacy is treated like a basic human right, sometimes even more important than emotional closeness. Children are taught to have their own rooms, their own schedules, their own lives very early on. On the outside, this looks healthy. On the inside, it slowly trains people to associate closeness with intrusion. So when adulthood arrives, living separately doesn't feel unnatural. It feels correct. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When independence becomes the default, asking for help starts to feel embarrassing. And when asking for help feels embarrassing, people stop doing it, even with their own family. That's why so many Americans will struggle silently rather than move back home. They'll take on multiple jobs, sink into debt, and quietly burn out, all to avoid the one thing society told them not to do, depend on someone else. Think about how strange that is. Family is supposed to be the one place where dependency is safe, where vulnerability isn't judged, where failure doesn't reduce your worth. But in American culture, even family becomes part of the performance. You're expected to show progress every time you visit. A better job, a better apartment, a better version of yourself. And if you don't have that, you distance yourself. That's why some Americans don't visit home often. Not because they don't care, but because they're ashamed of not making it. Yet, now let's talk about money, because this is where the system really traps people. In the US, moving out early often means taking on rent, utilities, food, transportation, insurance, and student loans all at once. Financial pressure becomes normal, stress becomes routine, and survival mode becomes a personality trait. People start confusing exhaustion with ambition. In many other countries, family support acts like a financial buffer. It gives young adults room to breathe, to experiment, to fail safely. In America, failure is personal. It's private, and it's expensive. Ask yourself this. How many great ideas, careers, and dreams died early because someone had to focus on paying rent instead of building a future? And yet, Americans keep telling themselves this is the price of freedom. But freedom from what? From shared responsibility, from emotional safety, from interdependence. Here's a real-life moment that captures this perfectly. A 25-year-old American loses their job. They panic, not just about money, but about identity. Their first thought isn't, my family will help me, it's I can't let anyone know. They cut spending, cancel plans, isolate themselves, and pretend everything is fine. Weeks go by, stress builds, mental health declines. Now imagine if the first thought was, I'll go home for a while. For many Americans, that thought never even appears because home no longer feels like an option. It feels like retreat. This is where loneliness quietly takes over. America is one of the most socially connected countries in the world, yet one of the loneliest. People have friends, co-workers, neighbors, but no safety net they feel comfortable falling into. Relationships are everywhere, but depth is rare. And family, the deepest connection of all, is often kept at arm's length. So people learn to self-soothe, self-manage, self-diagnose, self-heal. And while that creates resilience, it also creates emotional distance that's hard to undo later. As Americans grow older, something interesting happens. The same independence that once felt empowering starts to feel heavy. The silence in apartments feels louder. Holidays feel shorter. Phone calls feel rushed. And suddenly, the family you left behind feels farther away than distance alone can explain. This is when many Americans start questioning the system, but by then, habits are deeply formed. Parents age separately. Siblings drift into different states. Cousins become strangers. And family turns into a memory instead of a daily presence. Now pause for a second and ask yourself, was all this distance really necessary? Because independence doesn't have to mean separation. Other cultures have proven that. You can grow, earn, build, and succeed while staying close to family. You can become your own person without cutting yourself off from your roots. But in America, roots are often seen as something to outgrow instead of something to stand on. Here's the lesson that doesn't get taught enough. True strength isn't doing everything alone. True strength is knowing when you don't have to. Independence should be a choice, not an obligation. Distance should be intentional, not automatic. Imagine a society where young adults could choose when to move out without being judged, where staying close to family wasn't mocked, where asking for help wasn't seen as failure, where success wasn't measured by how far you got from home, but by how stable and fulfilled you became. Would Americans still move away so early? Some would, and that's okay. But many wouldn't feel forced to. And that choice alone would change everything. So the next time you hear someone say, moving out made me stronger, ask the follow-up question no one asks. Stronger than what? Stronger than support? Stronger than connection? Or just stronger at surviving alone? Because there's a difference between independence that empowers and independence that isolates. And America has mastered one far better than the other. Now let me ask you something personal. If society didn't judge you, if pride wasn't involved, if success had no fixed image, would you still move away from your family as early as possible? Or would you choose closeness over distance? Think about that before answering. There's one final layer to this that almost never gets discussed. And it's the one that explains why this pattern doesn't just continue. It deepens with every generation. In America, identity is built around the idea of being self-made. The phrase itself is almost sacred. People don't just want success. They want success without visible help. And the moment family becomes present in your life, your achievements feel less impressive in the eyes of society. Even if no one says it directly, the message is always there. You did it, but did you do it alone? That mindset quietly rewires how people see family support. Instead of seeing parents as a foundation, they're seen as a shortcut. Instead of seeing shared living as smart, it's seen as lazy. Instead of seeing emotional reliance as human, it's seen as fragile. And once those ideas take hold, moving away doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like proof. Proof that you're capable. Proof that you're strong. Proof that you belong in a culture that worships independence. But here's the irony. America celebrates self-made people, yet almost no one is truly self-made. Every success story includes unseen support, emotional, financial, psychological, but Americans are trained to hide it. And when support must be hidden, distance becomes convenient. That's why so many Americans don't just move out, they move far. Different states, different time zones, different lives. Physical distance helps reinforce the illusion of total independence, and the cost of that illusion is paid later. When life gets overwhelming, when careers stall, when marriages strain, when mental health cracks, many Americans don't know how to lean on family anymore. The muscles for closeness weren't exercised. They were replaced with coping mechanisms. So people cope alone. Imagine a society where young adults could choose when to move out without being judged, where staying close to family wasn't mocked, where asking for help wasn't seen as failure, where success wasn't measured by how far you got from home, but by how stable and fulfilled you became. Would Americans still move away so early? Some would, and that's okay, but many wouldn't feel forced to. And that choice alone would change everything. So the next time you hear someone say, "Moving out made me stronger," ask the follow-up question no one asks. Stronger than what? Stronger than support? Stronger than connection? Or just stronger at surviving alone? Because there's a difference between independence that empowers and independence that isolates. And America has mastered one far better than the other. Now let me ask you something personal. If society didn't judge you, if pride wasn't involved, if success had no fixed image, would you still move away from your family as early as possible? Or would you choose closeness over distance? Think about that before answering. There's one final layer to this that almost never gets discussed. And it's the one that explains why this pattern doesn't just continue. It deepens with every generation. In America, identity is built around the idea of being self-made. The phrase itself is almost sacred. People don't just want success. They want success without visible help. And the moment family becomes present in your life, your achievements feel less impressive in the eyes of society. Even if no one says it directly, the message is always there. You did it, but did you do it alone? That mindset quietly rewires how people see family support. Instead of seeing parents as a foundation, they're seen as a shortcut. Instead of seeing shared living as smart, it's seen as lazy. Instead of seeing emotional reliance as human, it's seen as fragile. And once those ideas take hold, moving away doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like proof. Proof that you're capable. Proof that you're strong. Proof that you belong in a culture that worships independence. But here's the irony. America celebrates self-made people, yet almost no one is truly self-made. Every success story includes unseen support, emotional, financial, psychological, but Americans are trained to hide it. And when support must be hidden, distance becomes convenient. That's why so many Americans don't just move out, they move far. Different states, different time zones, different lives. Physical distance helps reinforce the illusion of total independence, and the cost of that illusion is paid later. When life gets overwhelming, when careers stall, when marriages strain, when mental health cracks, many Americans don't know how to lean on family anymore. The muscles for closeness weren't exercised. They were replaced with coping mechanisms. So people cope alone. They scroll. They distract. They work more. They joke about being tired. They normalize burnout. And because everyone else around them is doing the same thing, it feels normal until it doesn't. This is why therapy is so common in America. Not because Americans are weaker, but because they were taught early to separate instead of stay. When family support is distant, people look elsewhere for emotional grounding. And sometimes that helps. Sometimes it saves lives. But it also highlights something important. People still need connection. They just weren't taught where to safely place it. Now think about older Americans. Many of them encourage their kids to move out early because they believe that's what love looked like, preparing children for independence. And in many ways, they succeeded. Their children became capable, resourceful, strong, but they also became far away. So now, aging parents sit in quiet houses, waiting for phone calls, counting visits, and pretending they're fine with distance because that's what the culture taught them to value. Independence for the child often becomes isolation for the parent, and no one talks about that part. This isn't about blaming America. This is about understanding it. The U.S. is a country built on movement, migration, expansion, reinvention, leaving. Home is written into its DNA. So, it makes sense that the culture celebrates departure more than staying. But just because something is historical doesn't mean it's emotionally sustainable. Here's the question that ties everything together. What if success wasn't defined by how early you left, but by how balanced your life became afterward? What if strength included knowing when to stand alone and when to stand together? What if family wasn't something you escaped from, but something you evolved alongside? Because the truth is, moving away early doesn't automatically make people mature. Sometimes it just makes them tired sooner. And staying close doesn't automatically make people dependent. Sometimes it makes them secure enough to take real risks. So maybe the real issue isn't that Americans move away from family too early. Maybe it's that they were never shown another respected option. And once an option disappears, a culture stops questioning it. So I'll leave you with this thought, not as criticism, but as reflection. If independence didn't require distance, if success didn't require separation, if love didn't require leaving, how different would American life look? And how different would people feel? Because at the end of the day, humans don't thrive in isolation, they adapt to it. And adaptation shouldn't be confused with fulfillment. Now tell me, do you think America got independence right? Or did it sacrifice something essential along the way? That answer matters more than we think.